Christianity. So logical positivism is like Richard Dawkins. Are you guys familiar with him? He's a prominent biologist, I think. He's like a microbiologist, but one of the best scientists. Oh, well, there we go. Was it me?
I'm not sure.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, it seems to be working.
Great.
Just chose the room and
See that? Yeah, the red light on the bottom wasn't coming on, so I don't know. Okay, whatever. All right, cool. Thank you so much, Brad, for just setting up again. All right. Whatever. That's strange. Sorry, my mind has been other places, so I apologize for my scatteredness because of this, but now we're fine. Logical positivism says, I do not believe in anything unless there's evidence for it. Even within theistic evolution, there is evidence, or there is this idea that it's trying to explain how the world can be, or the earth can be millions of years old, and God still be a creator. So the idea that God still be a creator is automatically rejected because I have no evidence for that. No concrete evidence. Like 100%, this proves this to be true. Like if I were to say, and I know that this automatically goes against it, but whatever, like this color is black. Because if we think of color as like a social construct, you can go down that hill. But if I say this is black, there's evidence because I know that this is black because of X, Y, and Z. God is totally outside of that. Because you cannot prove God's existence. Like beyond a shadow of a doubt to where everyone would just believe it were true.
How does a Christian believe like that? How do they believe in God when? Well, I guess they have faith, but if they can only explain it through 100% like logical statements and they see miracles, do they say, well, that makes sense because it's God? Or do they say?
That's what is it Jefferson, the Jeffersonian Bible, right? He took all of the like miraculous out of the New Testament. Well, yeah, but he was also a deist, and so like he didn't believe that God worked in this world. He was a clockmaker God who just set it going, and then at creation, and then just let it go and stepped back, huh? Yeah, he did. And so I think that what you're doing is thinking that I'm arguing that these are two views of like Christians. No. This is just a philosophy with how we interact in the world and like how we engage with the world. This is just a pure faith. I do not need any evidence. This is I need nothing but evidence. Both of these, I think, de Lubac would say, are that vague faith because they're the extremes that don't care to actually address all of the information given and all of the evidence, right? Does that help make more sense?
Yes.
Because fideism says, well, I don't need to know that the earth is millions of years old. The Bible tells me it's 6,000 years old. Okay. Logical positivists will say, well, I don't need any evidence. I know that I know that the earth is not 6,000 years old. Right? So like different conclusions, but very similar like ways of getting to those conclusions. The conclusions spread out, but where they start is kind of the same. No room for all of the evidence. Yeah. Like the miraculous.
This is not super related to this. Did you let Hannah know that it's back up and running?
I did. Thank you. Yeah. And she hasn't set up on there, but even if she doesn't get on, well, I'll just send her the link for it later. But I appreciate that. Thank you for being so thoughtful. Hopefully you heard that, Hannah, because Reese is, I don't know what I was going to say. Whatever. Reese is a good friend. What time do we get out of this class?
I have no idea.
50. Okay. So I think that he would say that both of these are vague faith because we don't choose to, what does he say? Only have that vague faith which is satisfied with a few external practices and whose apathetic adhesion is more culpable perhaps than the impiousness of heresy. Just the idea that I don't care to actually take all the evidence because I'm set. I know what's true and what to believe. The difficulty is that we don't take both of these, faith and reason, not to be like cheesy and cliche and take the name of the class, right, into account. Because the fideism is difficult because then it says, well, I can just believe in Bigfoot. I can believe in aliens. Yes, if you will. Because I don't need evidence for it. Whereas logical positivism doesn't leave room for the mystery that Amelia talked about of the unknown. Because there's no evidence, so why believe in it? man, what does that do for like your view of the world when you walk outside and see creation? Well, it's got to come from somewhere. That totally like just kills it. Any like wonder, any delight, any like love for it. It's like, well, it's all just, it's like logical positivism being like in relationships. Well, it's not really like love is just pheromones and chemical reactions. Dude, that's depressing. It is. We'll talk about logical positivism way more in like chapter 2 of Chesterton, which is actually a really great chapter we'll get into. But this is just to highlight that there is this like spectrum that we find, and it's not a matter of being right in the middle. It's not a matter of being right in the middle or finding your place on it. It's just a matter of acknowledging that and knowing like what is the proper approach going forward. I don't think it's being right in the middle. I think it's finding the best parts of both ends and then moving forward with that. So in other words, it's called a paradox. I know, last year, right? But I mean, it's true. Like that's kind of the whole approach of this class. But yeah, we'll talk about that later. Did you have your hand up, John? Okay, I appreciate that because we'll move forward real quick. Here's what I want to go to, and this kind of gets to the heart of what started with Amelia when she talked about like the idea of mystery, is on page 223 at the bottom. The total submission of the Spirit to revelation is a fertilizing submission because it is a submission to mystery. But the total submission of the Spirit to any human system, whatever, is a sterilizing submission. So what's the difference between fertilization and sterilization? Yes. So how is it that submission to revelation, which revelation here is a capital R, which what that means is like revelation in that sense, revelation in the sense of like God revealing himself to us through our experiences, right? How is it that that's fertilizing if there is no like scientific, like materialistic evidence for it, but the things that we have proof for, that's all sterilizing? How do those two things like coexist or like interact together? Mm-hmm. Well, there's going forward, but only.
Yeah, only going forward, but it only goes to a certain point.
Yeah.
Because of evidence, you can find so much of the evidence.
Yeah.
But with like revelation of the Bible, people can experience the Bible in different ways. They can feel it in different ways. So then there's running across sorts of like growth from it. But wait, so you were asking how they can relate?
Well, no. I think that's good just to talk about how that is actually the case, because the way that I was trained, even in the church when I first became a Christian, is the idea that you seek to know everything that you can, and anything that's mysterious, you just kind of like, well, yeah, that's true, but like, don't worry about it. Like, it'll make sense. Which always put me on this path of like not wanting to like think about like a rational, or not wanting to have a rational faith to understand why I believe what I believe. It was just always, well, you just believe in it. Okay, great. Like in the Trinity, when we talk about the Trinity and worldview, one of the things that I always try to emphasize is, I ask, well, how do you explain the Trinity? Well, you can't. It's illogical. Well, no, it's not illogical. And that's a really important point, because we just say that because we don't understand it. But it's not illogical, because if it's illogical, then why the crap do you believe it? I mean, seriously. So, because if it's illogical, then just believe in aliens. Or, whatever else. It has to make sense. But even in that rationality, there has to be this like hint, this like touch of mystery and faith, as there is in the Trinity and the Incarnation. It does. But here's what I would say, and exactly what you're saying, it is the Trinity is a fertilizing doctrine, not a sterilizing one, because it is infinite by nature, which makes it incomprehensible, completely incomprehensible to the extent that I have complete understanding of it. But also, if I could come to completely understand it, it ceases to be God. Like by nature, right? Because it is not infinite in that sense. But here's the thing. Outside of Christianity, it's impossible to argue someone to faith by talking about the Trinity. That is like the quickest way to like turn someone off and be like, oh, well, you guys just believe in rainbows and unicorns. Cool.
Do you believe in rainbows?
Okay. I always say rainbows and unicorns and then like qualify them like, well, rainbows are actually real, so unicorns and leprechauns. There you go. But it's again one of those things that we kind of talked about at the beginning, where the one way to understand it completely is to accept it by faith and then to live in that faith. Augustine talks about this in his book De Trinite, which is on the Trinity. And he says, I do not understand the Trinity so that I can believe in it. Like full comprehension doesn't then beget belief or faith. But I have faith in the Trinity, in its reality, in its divine being and all that, in order that I might understand. The idea is that as soon as I believe in Jesus, it's not like everything makes sense. But you have to include engagement with Scripture, number one, and then number two, your experience of it. Which is why, like, I in a lot of my classes, I hammer on like contemporary preaching. Like preaching in evangelical churches is mostly always about like getting to understand a passage. Whereas, like, I've preached several times in my life. I'm not a great preacher. But whenever I preach, I don't care about understanding. I care about bringing people into the presence of the divine amidst that. Because that's kind of the goal. Because it's about so much more than just understanding. So, the idea behind this fertilization and the sterilization is that a fertilizing faith or fertilizing system is one that acknowledges the reality of, what we can evidentially believe, but also the reality of mystery. Because if there's mystery, then there is an infinite pursuit of discovery, which means that we grow, just like what you're talking about. We grow. We can never stop growing because we're always encountering God, albeit in different ways. If it is a human system, it is sterilizing because it will ultimately have an end. Rationality only has an end, like that logical positivism, because you can only come to a point at which you say, okay, I get it, and not beyond. Another way of saying this is that to acknowledge mystery, it expands life, because then it means that there is nothing but possibility. And like opportunities for growth and opportunities to, grow. The human system contradicts life, or it constricts life. Because then it says, well, I can only grow in as much as this system allows me to. It's like agnosticism. Do you guys know what it means to be an agnostic? What does it mean, John? Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. What is it that brings an agnostic into, let's just say, like faith and theism, like Christian theism, like Jesus? What are the things, or what is the thing, maybe, that brings an agnostic from just believing, well, there is a God, but I don't know which one it is, to Christianity? Experience through Christ, absolutely. I would 100% agree with that. Because it can't be like getting the doctrine right. Because their agnosticism is a commitment to rationality. Because I want to believe, but also like I need what? Evidence. I need these like proofs to believe it. Well, it's probably not going to bring that person into faith because they already are an agnostic, because they don't want to like kind of take that jump. So it has to be something experiential. There is so much more to your faith than just what you believe. Like the doctrines, though they are some of the most important parts of your faith, particularly the incarnation and the Trinity. But there is so much more to your faith than just exactly what you believe. It's the posture with which you hold to how you engage with reality. So that's what we're talking about with this like fertilization and sterilization. two of the most important things that we'll talk about at the outset, because it really kind of challenges us when we think about reading Orthodoxy and what Chesterton is going to say about how he came to faith. Because Orthodoxy is all a book about, it's his memoir essentially of him coming to faith. It's very different than probably all of us and how we came to faith, and that's okay. But it's one that when you read it, you find it everywhere, and even in your own life. Here's the last thing. Is on page 228, the next page. De Lubac says, faith, if it be really faith, is always one, always entire. It envelops the totality of its object. That's what the gym alarm, I think, is off. Yeah, the gym alarm is off because it should be 1 o'clock. This is no different than what I think we were saying at the beginning of you can't have lesser or more faith. It is you have faith because that's the posture. It's the state of being. We'll come back and we'll start with this tomorrow. We'll go through the other two tomorrow as well. Thanks, guys. There's a reason that we read it and we spend not big words. The one piece of advice for orthodoxy that I'll give you, I'll wait to turn off the stream for this. The one piece of advice that I'll give you about orthodoxy is you don't mistake the forest for the trees, right? So he has a lot of one-liners that are really great. Some are pretty frustrating. Some are kind of offensive. Don't lose track of his point for the sake of focusing on that one-liner, right? So maybe that'll make sense later, but that's what I would say.